Let's go ahead to our next topic here, our first topic, I guess, for the day. And, we don't want to get soaked. It's kind of a snowy season, not really a get-soaked season. But, John, tell us about in the cyber world, you can get soaked a little bit, too, I guess.
Yeah, so this is a campaign that's just kind of coming out this week that people are discussing. It's called the SoakSoak campaign. And it's named after the domain name, which is SoakSoak.ru, that is getting redirected to. So this is not some new technique. We've seen this technique before, but it is kind of a large-scale campaign, so it's probably good to make people aware of it. Securi, they are the first ones to report on this campaign. They did a pretty decent blog write-up. There's still some emerging information coming out today, kind of as we speak. I was reading up, so they don't have all the details yet, but we can kind of give you the high-level overview of it. The basic gist is there's a campaign going on where they've identified that there's an exploit vector in the Rev Slider plugin for WordPress. And there's an actor out there who is finding WordPress sites that have the Rev Slider plugin installed and goes and tries to exploit them. So the first thing it does is it goes and uses a local file inclusion vulnerability, which basically means that I can use a PHP script up on the web server to ask it to give me a file that's also on the web server that I should not have access to. So the first thing they grab is the wp-config.php, which gives you the configuration of your WordPress site, which might have like the SQL password and other types of passwords and database names for things like that related to the WordPress site. And then the next thing they do is they leverage another vulnerability in the Rev Slider plugin to upload another malicious exploit into there, and they'll put the FilesMan backdoor, which is a pretty common backdoor. It's a web shell, basically. So we've talked about other web shells probably in the past, but C99 is another really big one. But FilesMan is basically just a web shell. It's in the path there. We have it on the slide here, and this is kind of where it gets deployed. So they can just go to that, and now they've kind of bypassed all of any kind of password protection or administrative protection. They operate under the effective user ID of whoever's running that HTTP server.
All right.
So then they can go through and do whatever they need in terms of administering with the FilesMan, because it gives you access to read and write files off of the web server. And they will, they're updating a file called swfobject.js, which is part of the WordPress site, so that it imports that JavaScript as part of its function. And what they're doing is they're modifying it to redirect to another website. And there's actually some code. They're just doing some analysis today, I saw, where they're kind of looking through the obfuscated code that's in there. So they take JavaScript, and we've probably shown this before on the show, where they'll compress it and pack it into things so it's not very readable unless you unpack it all. And they've noticed that there are specific code branches in that JavaScript for Firefox and for Internet Explorer 11, but they haven't gotten to the details of, well, are they exploiting something specifically there or not yet? But that's the guess here. So long story short, actors out there finding vulnerable WordPress sites with the Rev Slider plugin, infecting them, so that when visitors come to the website, they potentially can get infected themselves with additional malware. So it enables this drive-by exploit type of thing, where if you can hit a large number of these websites, you'll get some people that are browsing those websites they'll get their PCs infected, and it's going to be a different malware infection at that point that's pushed down to the machine. But
okay, now do we know that that's what they're doing?
We don't just yet.
Okay.
So they're still kind of analyzing what's going on. I didn't see any clear indication of what is being delivered to visitors who visit, other than being redirected to that SoakSoak.ru website. And there's another one too that they pointed out earlier today, which I didn't get into the slide deck, but it's another .ru one. I just can't remember what the actual URL is. In all, Google has kind of identified WordPress sites that are likely to be compromised. It's pretty easy to determine if it's, for an outside actor, if you hit the WordPress site, it's pretty easy to see in the JavaScript that comes back that it's been compromised. Right. So Securi actually has kind of a scanner tool that you can go to their website, put in your website's URL, and it'll go check to see if it looks like you're impacted or not.
So they're basically acting as a proxy for you to pull
in a way, yeah. You just put your website domain in there, they'll go visit your website and see if it looks like it's attempting, if it's got this payload in the response traffic that comes back.
Okay.
So Google's, in partnering with Secure and Google, they kind of identified about 11,000 domains, which is a lot of WordPress domains.
Yeah.
It's about 100,000 WordPress websites. That's the guess on the total number that are being actively blacklisted by Google. So when you're on Google, you might see in your search results, this is a reported attack web page or something in the search results. And I think Firefox also integrates with that safe browsing API as well. So they'll just block it if you use Firefox. But if you have WordPress and you have RevSlider as part of that, I'm not even sure what the RevSlider plugin does. I think it's some kind of like drag and drop widget that you can use with WordPress. To kind of help facilitate, make it easier to do your blogging and whatnot. But if you have those, you would want to update RevSlider, but you'd also want to get rid of the infection, which could be tricky because they're installing multiple backdoors as a part of this. They've also got a copy of your wp-config.php, so you'd have to change your passwords potentially. Additionally, they've noticed that if you're a user and you have multiple websites, so maybe I have I've got my login on some web hosting site and I have a WordPress site, but maybe I've got a Joomla one for something else that I'm doing or another one for something else. So via that one WordPress website I have, they can go infect all these other ones as well because they have effective user rights or access to all of the websites that you manage under that one user account.
Right.
If you have, that kind of situation on that web hosting account.
So, this may be a statement of obvious or a question that's relatively obvious. So the 11,000 domains that have been basically blacklisted by Google, these are otherwise perfectly legitimate. You may be used to going there, and next thing the vulnerability's been identified and by these actors, they've infected it. Now, what was legitimate is getting flagged as basically a compromised site.
Right.
So, and from a user experience, I guess you can still go there if you're brave enough, right?
If you're brave enough, depending on what your browser is, you might actually get stopped before you get there. So you might, like I said, Firefox will probably pop something up on your web page. Usually it's a big red page that says this is a reported attack website. Are you sure you want to go here? And they'll have like a proceed anyway for, if you're really crazy and you don't believe them or whatever. Like I said, the Google search results will show some things there. If you're using Internet Explorer, it might actually have something in there too. I think they have some interaction with that as well, but I'd have to check. Other browsers like Opera, I would think Chrome probably is using the same safe browsing type stuff that Google has in, because they're, Google and Chrome are the same. But depending on your browser, you may or may not get stopped before you get there. Some of the safe things to do if you do use Firefox, you might want to enable or install the NoScript plugin, which disables all JavaScript, because the only way you'd be able to get compromised here is via JavaScript, as far as we're aware currently. That's the basic gist. Really,
the one problem with that is that a lot of WordPress sites, use a lot of JavaScript. So if you have NoScript installed, but you regularly go browse to these WordPress sites, you're probably going to have turned JavaScript on for that site because it's difficult to get the user experience or to administer them. So you likely have turned it all on already for that site. So once it gets infected, you're probably going to get infected anyway.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, that is a good point. So for anybody that's not familiar with darn it, I forgot.
NoScript.
Yeah, NoScript.
NoScript.
I'm a user, but not really paying attention. In any case, it basically gives you control of what scripting you allow use in your browser, and the opportunity to control which websites you are willing to allow the scripting capabilities on. So if you've whitelisted the site, it's basically as if you didn't have the NoScript on there.
Right. While we're on the subject, another good tactic is use Sandboxy, which is another kind of shareware, freeware, although you can pay for it to get rid of the nag screen, but that's another really good option, and you can kind of leave your JavaScript on. I use Sandboxy because basically Sandbox is your browser experience. It's very hard, unless they have a specific Sandboxy exploit, to get out of that sandbox.
Yep.
which is rare, for them to know that you're using Sandbox
Yeah.
and try to
And there are,
target you.
there are other products that do these
Yes.
kinds of things, but these happen to be ones that we have a little bit of a personal experience
Right.
with, I would call it.
Yep.
All right, very good.
Yeah, and one of the things that I would highlight here is that if you administer a WordPress site, you need to be going in there fairly regularly and checking whether there are updates for your plugins. Use the plugins through the WordPress.org plugin site, and make sure you update those on a fairly regular basis, because this has been updated for a while, but there are a lot of sites out there that didn't have it. And if you installed it through any other third-party site where it didn't show the update in your little update panel of your WordPress admin, then you got caught.
Yep, absolutely. I think that's one of the very important aspects of any cloud service that you're using, that is to make sure you've taken a little time to understand what your responsibilities are from a security standpoint versus what the provider's responsibilities are from a standpoint. And it could be as simple as a username and password, but as you point out, Jim, if you're adding widgets or applications on top of that service, it becomes something that is most likely your responsibility. And sometimes even what the cloud service provider is providing may become your responsibility to some extent. So if you're just getting, basically bare metal as your service, then you will have the responsibilities for the operating system and patches associated with that. And even if you're getting just basically an operating system or a compute as a service, that operating system may not get patched until you ask them to actually do it, because they don't want to disrupt your application. So a very important aspect of any cloud service subscription is to understand what your responsibilities are and what things are going to be done, and to make sure that stays in a secure state, or gets into a secure state in the first place, for that matter.
And stays there.
I was going to say, I realize this is a story about a vulnerability in a WordPress plugin, but I would actually recommend one plugin, and it's Security's own site check. I mean, I've used it on several sites before, and it's useful. It'll let you know when certain things are happening. If there's a brute force attack against your usernames, it's helpful.
All right, very good. Thanks, Matt.